Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode. That I want to start with a question. Are you one of those women who, when Mother's Day comes around, if your mother is still alive, that you could spend 4 hours in a store looking at cards, but none of them actually fit the relationship you have with your mother? Anybody? Have you always wondered or had that feeling that something was off and it makes you feel shameful? It's like everyone else has these amazing relationships, supposedly, with their moms. We see this in movies and on TV, but you don't actually have that kind of a relationship with your mother. Well, if you are nodding your head, then this two-part series is for you, where I'm going to be breaking down the mother wound. Now, that's what I'm doing in this episode, and then in next week's episode, I'll be giving you steps, things that you can do towards your healing. This episode is more for you to be able to identify if you are suffering from a mother wound. I've talked quite a bit about narcissistic moms and how daughters of narcissistic mothers can not just survive but thrive, right? That's probably my most popular YouTube video and podcast episode. But there was something that was missing. Because being a psychotherapist for 22 years, I would see women suffering in their relationship with their mother, what they didn't get in childhood, but their mother wouldn't fall into the category of having narcissistic personality disorder. That's very specific. And about maybe 6% of the world has that, supposedly. I mean, I don't know how updated those statistics are. But I know that there are way more women walking around suffering from this mother wound than there are moms who have narcissistic personality disorder, right? Because we have to think that probably half of that, more than half of that, with the narcissistic personality disorder are men. So I wanted to move into this because I've gotten lots of questions and, I've been answering your questions. And this was one of the questions that came in. And initially with the mother wound stuff, I'd done a bunch of research and I was like, all right, what are they even considering a mother wound? So there's sort of two schools of thought. So let's just start with that. One is slightly more esoteric or existential, and yet I believe it to be true, which is that women or moms basically pass down this sort of unintentionally, this collective injury from being female in our society. What they experienced, the indignities, the abuse, the marginalization, whatever that may be. So that makes sense to me, right? I think that there are many things that our mothers and fathers hand down to us, sometimes as unopened packages, and as something that it's not what you would want to do, right? It's not intentional. It's just the way it is. I'm more interested in the psychological view of the mother wound, which is basically mothers who cannot and did not treat their children with love and compassion. And I believe that that is way more common than people who have narcissistic personality disorders. So moving into what does this actually look like? This is your mother not being emotionally attuned to you as an infant. So this could be because they were negligent, they weren't there. This could be because maybe you were in an incubator early in your life and she couldn't have access to you. But how we know what this is, or, there's this whole thing about attachment style and attachment theory that is connected to this whole thing about the mother wound. Because if we look at the whole thing with attachment, right? So this is first basically theorized by John Bowlby, but then there were many other therapists along the way who basically expanded on the work that he did, basically saying that the first person we have a relationship with in the world is our mother. So what happens? How do we see ourselves? How does our sense of self get developed? Well, it's really about how a mom mirrors a child. How consistently does that parent mirror the child? So when you do mirror, now think about it, when you see a little child, when you see a 1-year-old or an 8-month-old, mostly you'd lean down, If they yawn, we almost mimic them, right? Think about it. Or if they're sad, we're like, oh honey, why? They're sad, our face gets sad. We're mirroring them. This is their first internal representation of themselves, is from the mother. But if the mother is mean or mad, or is mad because the child is crying, or negligent, what happens? Well, now you have this inconsistency in your relationship with yourself, basically. There's an inconsistency with your self-identity, which is really the most important part of this, is how do you see yourself? Right? How do you see yourself? Well, if it's from a compassionate mother's point of view, then you can see yourself with compassion. Right? If it's from a mother who is inconsistent, there are all these different attachment things that happen when we have a mother who could not or would not mirror and nurture, who was not attuned to the child in the infancy stage. So there are different things that can happen. Now, the best way of being attached, if we're talking about attachment theory, is being securely attached. So that means that you had a parent who was attuned to your needs. Doesn't mean that they gave you every single thing you wanted, or, touched you every time you cried, but there was someone who was consistently attuned to what was going on with you. If you needed your diaper changed, if you were hungry, if you needed something, this creates a secure attachment, right? Because when the child was in need, their experience in the world is that someone is there and cares. So if you're in pain, it mattered to someone, because if you had an attuned parent, they came and did whatever you needed. If you move into daughters who didn't get that, kids who did not get that, you can either become ambivalently attached. So there's secure attachment and insecure attachment. In insecure attachment, there's many different names, and lots of different theorists have their own, but let's just put it into two. That it's either you are ambivalently attached because you didn't know. If you had an inconsistent caregiver, you didn't know if it would be the good or the bad mother who you would be encountering. So you're ambivalent, right? What you learn is that relationships are not reliable. They are unreliable. They can't be trusted. Or you can be avoidantly attached, because as much as you desperately want that parent's attention, and then that now goes out into the rest of our relationships, right, in our life, we want to be connected, we want love, we're also equally, if not more, afraid of what the cost is of actually seeking that love. So it's the same person that we want the love from, is that we're terrified they're going to basically annihilate us. So those are the attachment things. I've written more about this. I've talked about this pretty extensively. So there are other things that you can find on this out there in the world. And there are many other people who are way more expert at that than I am. I just talk about it because it's profoundly impacted my work with clients and my work in my courses. So how would you, because what this episode, the purpose of this episode, is to help you see how having this mother wound would show up in your adult life. So it'll help you be able to determine if you are suffering from this. And then next week, I'll get into strategies and things that you can do to basically get your bod on that path to healing. So bad relationships. Let's just start with the first indication, is that you may have relationships that are a disaster, right? I had a client who didn't understand why. It seemed so easy for other people. But her relationships, and this included friendships as well, all seemed to be like disastrous. So her experience of it was that people would say, you want too much, you're too demanding, you're too clingy. So she would be very insecure about her relationships. And the moment the people would start to step back, she would then be more clingy, and eventually if it was romantic, they'd break up with her, or if it was a friend, they'd start avoiding her. And so it wasn't really until we revealed the mother wound that she started understanding that she could get some of that soothing from herself, and that there were things that we could do together, and that we could unpack what she had experienced, which we did, of course, and then she wouldn't have to be so clingy in relationships. But this takes time, right? That is a whole entire process. Another indication of having a mother wound is having low confidence. So if you had a parent who didn't see you as worthy of love and attention, basically, whether that was it or not, right? Many times there might have been something physically or psychologically wrong with the parent. So they were out of the child's life, but the child will still feel the abandonment of that. You may still feel, I'm not important enough. This happens a lot with kids when parents get divorced when the child is young. If the mother leaves to go and create a new family, it's basically the child is left feeling like I wasn't important enough to stay for. You also can have all of these types of things happen with an addicted parent, right? Because they're sort of choosing the substance or the abuse over the child. At least that's how the child is going to feel it. So keep in mind, if you had a critical, mean mother, right, those harsh words of just not being good enough, not feeling good enough, or smart enough, or pretty enough, you internalize that voice. And so when we talk about, everyone has sort of a critical, punitive voice inside their head, but daughters who have this mother wound have it 1,000 times worse, where you believe that. You don't have anything else to believe. So there's a low confidence that can come from that. Now, this leads to potentially having the imposter effect, which I'll differentiate between the imposter syndrome, where I find in my practice, 22 years, high-functioning women, at any moment, if you were going to the next level in your career, if you were getting this big raise or this big promotion, or if you were at a television show that was going to be going national, there would always be a moment. There would be a period of time where suddenly you felt like a fraud and you were like, oh my God, I'm going to be on national TV and I have no idea what I'm doing. And now everyone's going to know that I was just faking it till I made it, but I'd never even learned anything. Now, that's different because that's a moment in time. When I'm talking about the imposter effect, this is a longer experience. This is sort of feeling this way all the time. So you got to think about, what do you feel that way in your life? It not just a moment in time at a peak experience, but do you always distrust what you know and always undermine your own success? Make excuses for your own success. Oh, that was because that person really liked me, but I'm not sure I really deserved the promotion. Those types of things. The next is basically being a boundary disaster. So what happens? If you have a mother wound, you become a pleaser. A lot of times you really have the disease to please with people because we're constantly seeking to get what we never got. So we do this not just with our mothers. Yes, we will continue to do that with our mothers forever. But you're unable to set boundaries because there's so much fear of rejection and abandonment and being alone, which is the way that you felt in your childhood. So I would say you're not great with the boundaries. Another thing is basically not trusting your feelings. Not trusting your feelings because you were raised to focus on your mother's feelings, right? And that's true with narcissistic parents and with the mother wound stuff. But the way that you survive, right, it's a very adaptive response to a super unhealthy, painful situation, is being dialed into what that parent needs. So your own feelings, what you learn in that process, whether it's covertly or overtly, is that how you feel, what you think, doesn't matter as long as the parent is happy. And this can go on for your entire life. This is not about, you could move out of the house and you could still have this exact same feeling. And another thing is that you're unable to trust other people. So there's a low trust factor. If you have someone who, like, you make a new friend. I had a client who was in this situation where anytime she would meet she always wanted better female friendships. She felt like hers were kind of lame and that she did all the work. Every time she had an opportunity to do that and she met someone at a work conference or whatever, she would always come in and say, I don't know, I feel like she wants something, kind of. Like, why would she want to be friends with me? And I'm like, why wouldn't she want to be friends with you? So daughters with this mother wound are like, why me? Like, I'm not valuable enough to have someone want to be in a relationship. Same thing with love relationships. No, I think it's just about sex. I think he really or she really just is wanting sex. I don't really think that they're in love with me. It's like because from such an early age, you felt invalidated as a human being that it is so easy to just bring this into your life. And so therefore we also need proving, right? We need that person to doubly and triply prove that they actually do want to be in a relationship with us. But even if they do, that isn't enough to heal this mother wound, right? Because they were not the perpetrator. So yes, good relationships can be great, but it's very difficult to actually create them until you uncover the mother wound itself. Another indication that you may have this is oversensitivity. And I don't mean people saying you're too sensitive. I mean you knowing that you are. It's not being able to self-regulate what is going on in your own emotions. If your deepest, darkest fear is that you are unworthy of love, attention, and affection because of this mother wound, you will find that experience everywhere. Could be at work, could be friends, could be that someone may be kidding, actually kidding, and you could torture yourself about what they said and think about it and ruminate about it for days, for weeks, for years even, and feel offended and be hurt and think it means that you're less than. It's a whole thing. So I don't mean if you're an empath, the way people will say, you're too sensitive. I don't mean it like that. I mean being sensitive, but also being sensitive in this transference way, right? We're having a transference, meaning we are reacting in real time to this situation from unresolved injuries or wounds from the past. So that unresolved wound is getting the message from your mother that you are not worthy of love, attention, and affection. And now that colors, it's almost like having a stain spill over your entire life, over every relationship. And it's so omnipresent that you don't even know that it's there until you start on this path of healing where you can recognize, oh my gosh, this was definitely me responding that way because of what was unresolved with this mother wound. So, all right, what else? Where we got lack of trust. Yep. All right. So I feel like I hit all of the points that I wanted to hit for you to be able to say, wow, yes. So it depends on how many of them out of the list that I gave you. But don't worry, I'll do it as a little cheat sheet so you're able to basically check which ones apply to you. And I really want you to tune in next week. This was a lot to try to hit in one episode, but I really wanted to do it because this person wrote me a note about it. Don't forget that I'm going to be starting the Terri Cole Show on YouTube in mid-April. Dates to be announced, and I can't wait, so I want to see you there. I don't even know how it works, but don't worry, my team will tell me, and then I'll tell you so you can be there. If you liked this, and I mean, if this resonated with you, I don't know if anyone's going to like it for real, but if you feel like it might have added value or made you think, please share it on your social media platforms. That is the best way for you to help me do what I want to do in this world, which is to empower as many people as possible to have the best lives that they can. I just want to lessen suffering and uplift joy. That is really my entire trip. So I want to say thank you for being in my crew. I super appreciate you. Thank you for watching, for listening, for sharing. I hope you have an amazing week. And please tune in next week for round 2, right? This is part 2 of the mother wound, where I will be giving you strategies, tips, and steps that you can take to get on your healing path, because you deserve to heal. I will see you next week.